Welcome everyone from Brisbane, Australia. So I hope you've all been staying safe, and I'd like to welcome you all to our very first consulting partner interview here at Appenate. So my name is Asel, and I look after onboarding and training of new business and our consulting partners here. And I'm delighted to have Lisa joining me here today. And we're going to be discussing how Lisa has taken Appenate on board and used it to help her consulting practice grow and stand up. So Lisa is the owner and principal consultant at Geeks R Good, and also the much loved president of the Mid-City Rotary Club, who does some great work, giving back to the community here in Brisbane as well. So Lisa, thank you very much for joining me here today. And I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and give us a bit of a background of your practice as well.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I've enjoyed working with Appenate for a number of years now, by introducing it to my clients. But my work has actually is quite an eclectic group of activities, which is to say that because I consult to chemical manufacturing takes on many types and variations of activity. Sometimes it's paint, sometimes it's fuel and hydrocarbons, solvents and other things. Sometimes it's general chemicals, and sometimes it's not related to any of those things at all, but those manufacturing principles can be applied in other ways. Over a number of years, the industry has been at pains to work out new and interesting ways or simple ways for them to comply with principles in quality, safety and emergency management, those sorts of things. So how do we call people to account, record evidence of compliance with a particular standard or certification, or that the paperwork doesn't become a job in and of itself? For large organizations, they often have people to an abundance of people to manage those processes and to execute those activities. For small to medium-sized organizations, it always seems far too hard. So they're always the guys that are lagging in those areas. And it actually puts them in an enormous disadvantage, because without certification or demonstrating that they can meet some of those standards, the result is that they don't get the big contracts. They don't get to work with the big end of town. They don't get to do that stuff, So every time that those guys had to print a form or put pen to paper or find their own way of dealing with reams and reams of paper that seemed incredibly wasteful and didn't actually contribute to the business improvement or relationships with clients or any of that stuff, it became arduous, to say the least. So it had been my task for the last 20 years in assisting those businesses to meet those demands. So I got to the end of my tether with one particular client where I said, if you're not going to print the form, you're not going to do the thing, and we needed to find new and interesting or easier ways for people to do what was required. I went on a journey to find an app to manage this stuff, because surely if you can order a pizza and watch it go from store to door, you can do that. You can do simple things, right? The other thing that also changed is that the technology, most mobile devices then became a resource that were a business tool. They weren't, just for fun. They weren't just for making phone calls. And the change was that they also weren't posing the same fire risk or flammable hazard risk or static discharge risk that other mobile devices had in the past. So mobile phones in service stations, as you know, are out of the question. But now that that's more quantifiable and easier to manage, mobile phones are actually a great tool. So.
Alrighty. So Lisa.
I can talk for ages.
It's a great talent that we have. I'll just like to take you a step back there, just to
Sure.
when you were saying that you work with smaller to medium-sized businesses who don't really have the opportunity to get business with the larger end of things, and that's kind of where you come in. So when clients are generally tending to look up, say, like a QA or risk management system, generally they would probably look to an off-the-shelf product first. So what kind of issues do clients face when they come to you specifically for help?
It's usually because they've trialed a number of things. It's not necessarily that they look for a digital solution straight off the bat. So it's often that to apply for a tender, they need to demonstrate that they are meeting a particular standard, either that they already have ISO 9000 or any of those occupational health and safety standards, the environmental standard, any of those sorts of things. And how you execute that is not specified.
Yeah.
So they then have to establish evidence that they have a process, a documented process, and that there's evidence of compliance, and that they are reviewing and managing that in a cyclical plan, execute, implement, execute, and evaluate that sort of thing. Those are the principles of all of the standards. So those elements or those issues for business had been in play long before the internet was invented.
Yeah, and I guess like when people are trying to implement those outcomes to them, those ISO 9001, those off-the-shelf products, they can tend to fit the requirements that most businesses have, but then when people come to you, that might not be the best fit for them.
Well, no, and or they need to take this in stages. So they know they want to attract those particular clients that demand those standards. But until they get certification, they tend to not be able to engage. So now tender processes ask, okay, so do you have that certification? And if so, go to page 34. If not, go to page 2. And off we go. But building those elements to demonstrate that they are more than just motherhood statements, more than just it's an ethos that they live. To manage those sorts of things, we needed to do it simply, something that people can do in 5 minutes. What also changed was legislative change is a big thing around this as well. So for those organizations that I've worked with that have a fleet of vehicles where they need to demonstrate fatigue management or maintenance management of their vehicles, it's the difference between getting pulled over and fined, or getting to a point where those drivers can't drive anymore because they've violated all kinds of things. Then the company being fined, then the director's going to jail. We want to avoid that kind of thing. That's how I help my clients.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing, right? It's like not every kind of there's not really like a set fatigue management or like a fleet management software which can do all those things.
Well, there are some systems, not to, but it doesn't necessarily incorporate everything. It's not. So the other thing that changed was that people have got very excited about integrated risk management systems, and that's what I do. So that it's not just quality, it's not just safety. There's no point having similar systems that run alongside each other if they're largely capturing the same detail. So the idea is to capture it once and then feed it to where it needs to go. So whether it's risk, whether it's safety, whether it's emergency management, whether fatigue management or quality, let's wrap it all in together.
Yeah. Have the integrated, one-stop kind of platform where all the information goes to. That's how is that kind of. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to actually find Appenate and what it actually that adoption process was?
Sure. So I guess I started talking about that because I get very excited about Appenate. So it was with a fuel distribution company that it was a prime target for uptake of digital interfacing because they were already using digital resources to deliver fuel. okay,
Mm.
in a mobile device through an app that, you know, they were either helping to develop or developing themselves. It was already something that everybody had to learn. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, there was a lot of belly aching. You know, there were a lot of people who, you know, drivers are, fuel drivers, tanker drivers, must have for them to go into and collect fuels, petrol or diesel.
Mm.
The business was set up in a way that they themselves had to have particular certifications. The vehicle has to be certified. It has to be checked regularly. It has to, you know, so they were already in a quite regulated environment. So they were all very well aware that these things are necessary for them to stay in business and for those guys to still be employed. So that wasn't really the issue. It was how they were going to do that efficiently and effectively with it. Yeah. So they would fill in a form. So for a long time, many of those drivers were filling in what they refer to as a load sheet or those sorts of things. And so what this business was doing was, okay, no more paper. Let's not cut down trees. Let's capture these things in a digital resource. When they realized that it was important to manage this stuff through safety similarly, so reporting faults in a vehicle and capturing all of those things, or where with the customer interface, for example, if they've had customers allege that they have spilled some product, there's no evidence of that spill, all of that sort of stuff. How do we manage those sorts of things? So that those drivers then found that could be done quite effectively. The reason I suggested with Appenate was that off-the-shelf products were either too complicated. These are drivers. Their primary focus is driving fuel from A to B, delivering it and going home again safely.
Yes.
That's the plan. Filling in a digital document that was 4 pages long and more tuned to an insurance assessor's assessment of an incident is not useful. So they just needed to capture what's happened and move on, you know, quickly and easily in a you know, formulaic way. I thought, well, surely there's a way that we, you know, you can get Word templates online. You know, there are free this, that, and the other thing for spreadsheets or those sorts of things. Surely there's something out there that exists. No, not really. So that's when it was a combination of things. I'd done a bit of research and I'd tried a few things, and they said, yes, now give us, you know, give us the outline of what you're looking for. Here's the outline of what you're looking for. Okay, now give us $100,000 and we'll build it for you. Which I went, yeah, no. So I'm not going to do that.
Also, like from a incident reporting perspective, and also the safety management, because they already had something for, I think, load management, or like they had some previously existing.
Yeah, they did. They were working with that, but that was actually a lot more clunky than how things turned out with Appenate. So after having I'd done a bit of research and I'd tried a few things, and that wasn't really coming together. Happened to have a catch-up lunch with John Burkett, and
yes,
whom I know through Rotary, and he had said, I know we're. Yeah, everything's related.
It's the rotary wheel of connections.
That's right. That's right. So he said, well, you know, you're a clever girl. You can see the back end of things, and it's mainly, you know, this is how that works. And I said, yeah, I'm not that clever, but let's have a look at what it can do. So I started a trial, and it was only after, you know, we tried to work out how it goes, because what I found was that I had to learn a new learn a new language.
So what was the initial kind of form or the use case that you wanted to kind of go forth with the truck?
Yeah, we just decided that we wanted to do an incident report. So, and a basic, this is where I am, this is who I am, this is the truck I'm in, this is the location and the customer that I'm delivering to, this is what happened, send. That's it.
Yep. then that tends to take such a long time to go from one person to another person posting. And
that's right.
Yeah.
So how you guys helped was that Paul then said, okay, so you've got we did a couple of sessions, and he said, okay, let's do a basic form, and you click and drop and la la la, which was like, oh, that's really great.
Yeah.
And you can take photos. Yeah. And then he did some really groovy and funky stuff, like creating, you know, the company icon and whatnot. And he says, no, we can change the background color. You know, it's orange and whatnot. I said, actually, the orange is perfect, because so's the client that I'm working with, their background is orange as well. So that was great. Yeah, so there were a lot of synergies that, you know, stuff we didn't have to change. But there were some other things that were a little more sophisticated. And I promote this to other people. I explain that no code was harmed in the development of this technology. Okay. I don't
probably ours.
anything. Yeah. I do take cues a lot from some of those information bits and pieces. And I guess as it's evolved, I've got more comfortable with doing these things. As I started to build data, things got better. And when we launched, it was, you know, there were plenty of times where having that digital interface made things a lot simpler, and protecting both the company and also the driver. It was actually a way that they could capture training records, which are things that authorities are always looking for. If you wanted to demonstrate, you know, a regular housekeeping check for, you know, if you get a visit from Workplace Health and Safety, trust me, it's you know, they ask for all kinds of stuff. You want to demonstrate that your fire extinguishers are being checked, tested, and tagged throughout the organization, that's the way to do it. But some of the other things that we added on, I guess, after we got familiar with the incident report, and we added things to the incident report. You know, when they realized that they could also take a video of what was going on there, or not just take photos and send them to somebody, you know, if they've had a vehicle accident, because that happens, not necessarily because the truck has done anything wrong, but with the members of the public, that simplifies it up immediately. You know, other than the fact that many of those vehicles also had, well, all of the vehicles had onboard cameras, front facing and cabin facing. It meant that it combined the evidence that the driver hadn't done something, you know, drastic, and it also confirmed, you know, some of those things where somebody has run straight into them, or run a red light, or done any of those sorts of things. And, you know, it's kind of something quite difficult, never tragic, but, you know, insurance claims are huge. So when we send these things to insurers, that it's immediate, you know, as it happens kind of thing. There are, you know, confirmation of, I'd say, take a photo of the license, take a photo. You know, it enabled the driver to take charge of those sorts of things and demonstrate that they actually, you know, I was doing okay, and then this idiot pulled out in front of me, you know. So it was those little things.
Yeah, so from the client's perspective, like it was initially like a compliance solution, but it also came back to kind of protect them in the case of potential like lawsuits, and also you know, just in general for the driver's own kind of well-being and for his safety as well.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But then I guess when the management teams realized that they could use that data to do more stuff as well, in terms of data analysis, in terms of managing routes and things like that for so generally the driver managed those sorts of things, but for new drivers or new training and other things, they were able to capture that stuff. For induction, it was really useful. So most in terms of fatigue management and chain of responsibility, it's not enough to just sign that you've read the procedure, you know, and I've never been a fan of that. So what we were able to do is set up a quiz. So you go, you know, so there's an icon for do your training quiz around that particular element of your induction or whatever training that we want to get them to do. Answer these questions, click those choices, send it in, sign on the bottom. It was great. So way better than a piece of paper, and it's stored for ages.
Did you do that induction process in person as the training with them, or like how did you structure the kind of training process?
Well, sorry, inducting them to Appenate or inducting them to their job?
Just in general, like induction to the kind of compliance processes. How did, because that's obviously quite a difficult part of getting people you know, onto a digital platform, is, you know, how do you get them to, you know, get them into this new process digitally? Like how do you kind of structure that process for them?
Because that particular client had to use their mobile phone, the company provided mobile phone to do fuel deliveries. They already had a buddy system up to go to use with that. There were occasions where there were some drivers who were less inclined to use a mobile phone for anything other than, you know, making and receiving calls. They got pretty quickly, right? So especially when, you know, that's I don't use digital technology. I'm not. If I want to do something, I'll just call you, and it's like. So it became my mantra. If you can use Tinder, you can use this. At which point they shut up pretty quickly. But I have to say that
there's a bit of overlap between us and Tinder.
Yeah, well, you know, I should have used ordering a pizza, but I have to say the Tinder thing ended the conversation pretty swiftly, to which you know, you'll be surprised to hear that I'm a bit of a no-nonsense, do it now or else kind of girl.
Yeah, definitely.
And the industry is like that anyway, so it's not just me. I guess it was because the compliance element is so serious, you know, the not doing these things could lead to, you know, bigger things. It's like, get in, do the training, answer the quiz. And answer the quiz, you know, answering the quiz was an open book exam sort of thing, but it was once so many of the members of the team operating remotely. So before there was COVID, these guys were already operating remotely. So they were, you know, away from office environments, and so they were entirely self-managing their thing. They had, you know, their quals, they had a truck, and off you go, kind of thing.
Yes.
Which is, and that doesn't suit everybody, but for this particular group, it was the autonomy of managing their workload and managing their delivery runs and routes and whatnot was, you know, very accommodating. And also, I suppose for that reason, their phone was their second best friend in all the world. You know, they had to, not because they had to check in, but it was a way for them to check in. So that there was a series of other devices that or protocols that were already built into how things were operating. So Appenate was just a great adjunct to all of those things, and an enhancement, I suppose, of how they were able to capture extraneous information, as though they still had an office, albeit that they were in the truck.
Pretty smooth integration with what they were already doing with the test, the kind of checklists and whatever.
Yeah. Because of those barriers in the past to use mobile phones in areas where there are flammable liquids or you know, fire risk and other things, a lot of people have been prone to just putting pen to paper all the time.
Absolutely.
But of course what paper doesn't do is creating a contactless environment. People aren't necessarily in an office, or they don't necessarily have access to a printer, or they don't, you know, there are a million and one excuses not to do what we're asking them to report an incident, or capture a non-conformance, or make a suggestion for an improvement of the system, or do some other kind of compliance requirement. One thing that a piece of paper also can't take a photo or capture a photo.
Can't really get much out of someone's description sometimes, trying to capture what a photo can capture.
No. So it's interesting you say that, because there are times in the past where people were writing their description of the vehicle accident that they have had, and drawing a diagram of the intersection.
That's, oh man, that's like,
or you can take a photo, so yeah, and so that revolutionized all of that reporting issue, and especially where the he said she said stuff around when somebody's had a vehicle accident with a member of the public. It's cuts through if you've got a photo, video, anything. So, and also photographic evidence of the driver's license front and back. That was a very simple thing. But man, did that change things for our drivers. And it gave them enormous confidence as well, to, that the company isn't going to second guess them if you give them the tools to do the thing. So it's actually worked very well. So.
Oh, it's fantastic to hear, and your clients must have quite a lot of confidence in you once you can give them that second layer of so just to kind of take a step back here, what was your kind of initial concerns about going to a digital platform? Because I know you mentioned building the forms out was a big one. What was there anything around that? Like, did you think that was a big hurdle that would be quite difficult to overcome initially?
Yes, I'm old enough to remember programming in Turbo Pascal at high school and university. So I'm positively ancient. That said, I wasn't particularly good at that, and although I could do it, but it was also a means to an end. That's how it was used. It was like mathematics as a tool, as a language, is for me a means to an end. For some people, it's the whole show. So in this particular situation, I suppose because my focus was I still need to provide the forms, procedures, policies, and all those system elements that are evidence that there is a system. I still need to provide that to the client. The form that it takes is entirely, up to, that's arbitrary. So what some organizations feel is a digital experience is just a form that I've created on a computer. Of course, that's not a digital experience at all, So, okay, so my learning around Appenate was, it was a bit of a steep learning curve in the early days, but happily I didn't have to code. Thankfully, I didn't have to code. What it did require me to remind myself was that there are very often logical processes, logical steps and an order in which things need to be done so that you get the outcome. So if I did the hard work for the people who are going to then be using it. So what you guys refer to as front of house and back of house, the front of house experience, we try to make as simple as possible and as inviting as possible. And you guys had already done hard yards on that because it is so useful and it is so simple. So my bit was making it easy and making sure that I was capturing the right information. So when you ask somebody to input something, the lists and things like that we use more frequently. So there are common responses that we could have. So for either a list of customers or, I'm just trying to think of, some of those things that you don't actually have to type it in, So when somebody fills in a form, writing their name at the top of the form every single time is like, seriously? Or even writing the date. So because those things are automatically captured in your, the way that those apps can be constructed, was like, okay, well, so that's by opening the app, you've already given who's opening it, who's starting the form, who's doing the thing. You've already captured a series of things: the time, the date, the location, the everything, and you've given it a number. Happy days. All right, so that's the top 5 lines of every form done,
Right.
and that makes
But
life
do
very
you
simple.
think? But do you think that someone who doesn't have a background in, say, like Turbo Pascal or some kind of coding language, and I know you're very experienced, as you said, but do you think that someone who doesn't have that background could also approach Appenate in the same way?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You can make your process do whatever it is that you want it to do. The form is such that I do all my best thinking in the shower, so I was thinking this morning, I've got a client that I need to help them capture or lead them into giving profiles on their app to their clients. Those clients that probably don't order large volumes of goodies, but they could, So how am I going to encourage them to start the uptake of those sorts of things? Because everything else I've given them, and so this new client is sort of, well, we're not really using any of those particular things. So by attacking their points of pain, which is entering basic orders, once a month, but they get, different thing, get the customer to enter the order. Happy days, and they're selecting from a short number of things that they usually buy anyway. If I can order flowers online and send them across the country, then surely these guys can do it with their product as well, So let's give them that opportunity. I think I've missed a couple of spots there, Asel. I want to go back a little bit and be clearer about some of the things that I was doing with those early forms with that particular fuel distributor.
I'm just trying to remember. Say
that. So because that company wasn't quality accredited, they didn't have an accreditation, but they were working to a set of known regulations. Should they wish to become accredited, it's all there, and so that's how we set it up. Because they were new, the company was new, it was all of that sort of stuff. So while they weren't being audited on the regular, their self-audit process stood them in good stead with a lot of tender processes. So that data then that was being captured could then be analysed, and they weren't necessarily capturing good data in the past. So when we talk about safety data and those sorts of things, because that's important for fuel drivers, as you can appreciate. Some of that we could categorize by virtue of the questions that we were asking in each of those forms. And we then had an immediate digital understanding of where things were at, because we had then classified and qualified any of the information that was coming back from the field. And in truth, what it did was made the job that I was supposed to be doing for my client much easier, while the guys in the field are actually, they're the guys doing the hard work, because, they're entering the forms.
And almost it's like setting the foundation for business improvement. And I'm sure you had some sort of way of analyzing that data and then looking at, what were the actual points which we can improve on in this business.
Well, classically, because Appenate is how it is, because of the connectors in the back end, we were, we used this a little bit, was to create a Google Sheet. So every time somebody entered their own thing, we could, it automatically created an Excel record of that thing. And it was segregated by operator. So whomever had entered the order, so every time they entered an order, the next one backed up, and it then gave everybody a clear picture of, who's contributing most to the system, who isn't contributing at all that kind of thing. Although the company didn't necessarily take advantage of that particularly, what it did mean was that there were other records stored elsewhere that was automatically creating a reporting system that, why not automate as much as possible, right? So that married well with where they wanted the company to go in the future, that rather than churning through all of those processes with a person doing it, it just set it up. And so that was great.
That's fantastic. So it almost sounds like, it was like this unexpected byproduct was that you had this means of analyzing a business, setting up measures for productivity, and almost gives you like another service that you could potentially integrate with your consultancy as well.
Absolutely. Of course, each of us as consultants are limited by how much the company wants to go ahead with it. So,
yes.
It's, yes, you want to be a couple of steps ahead of them, but you don't, sometimes they run ahead too far.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's okay. So in terms of what they wanted to capture, it could be done and more with Appenate, so that so many organizations look at their software selection, their suites of the media that they're actually using, and they find themselves using, a multitude of things that are running, in tandem and whatnot. What I wanted to make sure was that that wasn't going to be a factor for them. And in fact, what I saw was that there were often overlaps where actually Appenate could do more than that. So I had the great benefit of, I suppose, not being ground level, but I came in at a time where I've seen over the years how it's evolved, how the capability has expanded, how you can actually do more stuff with it. I was a little nervous about using some of the tables in the past, but now that seems really simple that I can do that with my eyes shut. And,
hey,
when I first started doing this, it's like, oh, I don't know whether I've got this right, and I'd make errors, and and there was a lot of testing and seeing what the result was, and back and forth. Now, of course, I can write an app in an afternoon, which is great.
I think that's a big credit to you, is that somehow, like, one of our biggest kind of like features is that we love to have human interaction. We sit down and teach people how to use our platform, but you actually haven't done that at all with our platform, because you've pretty much been self-sufficient.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's to the somebody else's detriment in that respect, but that's it. The way, I guess, and you and I have talked about this before, I find that Appenate is, like so many other great technologies, is that it is a user-defined technology. So however it is you want to use it, do that, and don't be dictated to by, how you want to get that done. So there, I'm sure if Paul looked back now over some of the forms that I've created and go, what's she doing? But I'd like to think that it serves purpose. It gets the job done. So there are a number of people who, I guess, what I should touch on, and I hope this is okay, is that some of the other organisations that I've been working with recently, some of them are actually very small teams, like 2 and 3 people in the whole company doing a whole bunch of things. So adding on a certification process and managing their audit responses and capturing that extraneous data, it seems extraneous data, in addition to the very many things that they have to do and that they only have 3 people to rely on. Appenate makes that really simple. So Appenate is able to give them the resources to do it once, get it done, send it in, and file, and it automatically files away. So when they want to go look for it, Okay.
So just to clarify for everyone listening, Paul is the founder of our company. So he founded the company probably about 11 years ago. And Lisa originally actually got on a phone call with him when she first signed up and was one of the first consultants ever to sign up with us. So, just to kind of go back to your initial kind of use case with the incident reporting, and you had a lot of insight, moving forward from that to look at different areas where companies found the most pain in their processes. But with that particular process of incident reporting in the trucks, what was the biggest pain points for them when you kind of decide to focus on that?
It was that people would have an episode, an incident, and not report it. It was very easy to not report things. And what we needed to everybody to go. So there's a pervading idea in that industry that people don't want, that the management teams and companies don't want you to report an incident. The reality was that no. The company wants everyone to report anything that happens, the smallest thing, the littlest thing. Tell us about it. Tell us.
Yeah.
And so my role in that group was less consulting, more part of the furniture, was I want to hear it all. I don't care how small it is. Tell us.
Yeah.
I don't have time to print out. Okay, here we go. Use an app. And I don't want to use that. It's no harder. Okay, right. All right. Well,
you got it with the tip line.
Yeah. So it was then there's no excuse not to report everything that happens. And the more often that you report these things, the better, because I'm able to then use that data for its intended purpose. And it's not to put a black mark against your name. It's how do we improve the whole experience of being a driver at this company. Yeah. So how do we minimize all the distractions and everything else? How do we keep your job being safe? How do we, all of that stuff. I could go on. I won't.
Yeah, from a driver's perspective, you're always, because I used to work in warehousing a long time ago back in New Zealand, and truck drivers, they always complain about, the company doesn't give me enough of this, and they give me too many hours, and they're never actually, writing these things down or reporting these things. So, what you touched on there is super important. And with regards to the time taken to send these kinds of the usual incident reporting, how did you find that when you use the digital kind of platform in addition to?
Yeah, well, so there were times where, before Appenate, the people would ring up and say, I've just had an incident. It's like, right, so what happened? And so it was therefore taking the time of the person who's just had an incident, not getting all of the information because you weren't getting photos, you weren't getting, and then taking the time of the person who's actually taken the call to then document all these sorts of things. And then the follow-up. And then no, that's not what happened. And this is actually what happened. And now send me your driver's license. And have you got your SLP? And have you got So we went to send me an email to tell me what happened. I had a spill. Yeah, what else? Where were you? Where at the client, the brother. So with Appenate, you open they log on and they open the thing. So immediately you've got a screed of information before they've even hit send,
Yeah. And it sounds like you've designed the form in a very specific way. So it's a very quick process for them to send it.
Oh yeah. If it can't be click, 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 gone, forget it, because it's also a situation where they're not supposed to be on their phone while they're driving, obviously. But when they're out of the truck, absolutely. So when some of these drivers, not that they were going long haul, most of them were, sort of metro deliveries. So that wasn't a complication. But if they were for a long haul, or they were working remotely, so if they were on a farm or whatever, or they got bogged or any of those sorts of things, or they wanted to do a pre-check of the vehicle before they started their delivery runs, that means that they would have to, take a photo of the tire tread depth and things like that. So you can guess the millimeter measurement, or you could take a photo, and that just that changes everything, because it's so quick. And of course, these guys were taking photos of everything anyway. They had a phone that took photos. It's like you get photos for all kinds of things. And it might have been things of the client, or an advertisement for the client, or the next event that the company should apply to be a provider at, all that kind of gear. I guess the place that it really assisted was for that particular client was when they were servicing the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. So yeah. So anytime anything happened, and happily nothing did, but we were ready in the event that anything happened. Nothing happened. Amazing. So in actual, but to get us the client, that was a big selling point. Wow, you wrote it yourself. Wow, well,
you kind of can say that you actually built this whole system for them.
Yeah, well, and so what I say to Appenate, and when the note that I sent to Paul was, you guys have made me look like an absolute star. You guys are doing actually the thing. I'm just applying it, so it's been great. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. You're applying it, but it like as you said, there is a bit of a learning curve to it. So it's not easy, but it takes time. And you managed to do that all yourself and set it up the way your clients exactly wanted it to. So that's completely your credit. So moving on from the incident reporting, were there any key forms that across the board your clients tend to use?
We established a bit of a lead form that was quite useful, and I noticed now that some of the template form apps that come when you open a new client include a lead form or a process or something like that. And so there were templates in the past which didn't necessarily fit for my clients, so I could look at them but not necessarily use them, apply them. I guess it was the next most useful things that we wanted to capture were the forms, the paper forms that they were using. So I just went through each of them, the next thing that they could be using or should be using.
Okay. So you had a list.
So yeah, well, as part of the compliance system, as part of all of those sorts of things, some risk analysis, some hazard analysis, and things like that we use that. Site inspections were really useful because when the sales team go to a new client, say, right, well, we're going to deliver fuel in great quantities to you, tanker loads of stuff. We need to determine whether your site is safe. It's safe to deliver that. That the truck isn't going to get bogged in the way through, that there's enough access and egress to get in and out of your driveway, all of that kind of thing. So to do that site inspection, it's like, okay, let's use the app, because then it captured that immediately. It could be shared with everyone, and all of those images, all of that analysis, all of the points that the checklist that we had set up captured all of that stuff, rather than writing it on a piece of paper and then it getting filed somewhere, or maybe it gets emailed, or maybe, but it creating the forms made sure that people were asking the same questions of clients each time, rather than, well, I'm going to have a discussion with somebody and I'm going to then report it after the event, and maybe you forget some stuff or whatever. But if you're doing it right there while it's happening, it's great. Style of forms that have been useful and immediate are internal audits. So where that's a requirement for some clients to form evidence that they've actually done a check. That's a good thing. So, or a housekeeping checklist, or those sorts. Take a photo of what's not correct, and make a plan to fix that. So.
That's probably one of the things we get the most is like sometimes we get people just saying we've got like 8 different cabinets of forms like backed up in my office, and I hate auditing time. Like whenever this comes around, this is the worst time of the year. So yeah, that's a huge one that we come across all the time.
Yeah, stop making paper. Stop making paper. And this really helps you do that. It's a fire hazard. Paper's bad. Well, the paper's not bad, obviously, but whatever you've got on paper should be special. If you keep it for always, but the paper isn't the record. With the form, it's the data that's the record. The data is important, and you're not able to do anything with that if it's on, a physical in a physical form. So
and considering that you're working remotely, you're designing these like digital systems. Like how has that kind of changed your approach to solving problems, and the way that you kind of look at that?
Because I've been working remotely always, I visit the client when they absolutely need to see me.
It's a rare thing.
Right. And since COVID, everybody else is just, I've been doing it.
Exactly.
But everybody else has joined in. Appenate has meant that I have a tool that is reliable, tried and tested, that the client can have confidence in. And so, sometimes my battle is encouraging that confidence and getting them to the point where they get it. If they don't use these sorts of things elsewhere, I think they find it weird that it can be something that they can, the initial thing is that they'll say, oh no, that's not what we want. And I'm like, okay, so we can change that. It's like, can you change that?
You can change that.
It's like, so I'll just fix that and make it what you want. It's like, oh okay. So
it's like, what's
ways,
next?
Like,
what else?
Right. In 2 ways, it's like, okay, so that's removed an objection to why I shouldn't do this, because you can fix it the way they want it. Making it the way that you want it is the way forward. So I guess the other aspect of that for clients is that there are no excuses not to do things that improve their business. So it just strips away, I suppose, all of those other aspects, paraphernalia that litter the day, that I've got to do this thing, or I've got to do this audit, and that's going to take ages. Well, I'll just put it off. And, so there's no excuse to procrastinate anymore to do the things that are good for the business. One of the big issues that I've had, and I guess this is not a remote issue so much as it is just generally, is that Appenate is a tool that helps a couple of things. Appenate is a tool that helps people work on their business, not in their business. Yes, it's about working in their business, but not, and so I think that for those people who are interested in working that way, for those clients that are maybe going through a growth spurt or whatever, Appenate can actually help them go to the next level, to plan the next level and then execute it. For a lot of people, the concept, putting the, you know, what it is that they want this to look like, because they might be on the cutting edge of their market, or, you know, they're taking the next innovation. Sometimes it's not clear what a good solution would look like, you know. So it's really hard for them to do that. Whereas once they've got a resource that actually, yeah, that's not what we wanted, and in fact that's nothing like what we wanted, we need to get rid of that, and that's a whole bunch of you know, money that we wasted on that particular thing. Whereas this is like, well, okay, well, we just change it to what we need, you know.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I love about Appenate as well, and that you know, when you're working with smaller businesses like you do, one of the biggest things they have is reporting, like getting their accounting done and sending this and getting ready for, you know, financial audits, and all this stuff is just like a nightmare for small businesses. And then when you look at it, like, people are so in fear of like digital systems, but in reality, what we're doing is making people's lives so much easier, and that's what you do for so many people. And those guys generally just don't tend to invest time into doing it, you know, themselves, because they just don't see the value in it.
It's not necessarily, I think they grasp that it could be valuable, but they just have no pathway to getting there, you know. And I think that Appenate provides that. Your question was around remoteness. Yeah, well, so it is a perfect solution for people who are working remotely to connect with headquarters, if you like, or where the head office is. But in fact, it is the most useful resource that I've had of gathering information from the field. So whether you're gathering information from people who work, you know, out remotely, or whether it's your customer that's remote, and that may not be physically remote, that's just removed from you. Gathering information from those people is the way forward. For some people, the information isn't necessarily something that they have valued in the past. So that's the other thing that Appenate can teach people and organizations, how important that information is to their business. And not just the analysis that they do afterwards, you know? Yeah.
And from your perspective as a consultant, like in how you solve problems, has that kind of changed the methodology, or you know, your ideology when you come into solving a problem for people?
Yes, and you know, it can get very dull if somebody says, because they will never say, "Give me a quality management system." You know,
no,
but it's more, okay, I need to get greater controls around whatever it is. We need to tighten up this process for blah. And so that really helps. One of the things that is, I think, quite underrated is the process of maintenance and repair, and what we call in manufacturing, lockout and tag. So if you've got an asset that is not functioning correctly, or it is due for repair, or it's due for, you know, program maintenance, or whatever's going on, Appenate is really useful in that, because you can actually take a photo of what's going on here. Or, and what I really love is using the barcode effect, where you can tag your asset with a barcode and read the barcode, uploads all that information, and that can be as little or as much as you want. Take a photo of its current state, and, you know, the other thing that I'm really enjoying, and this also talks to like lockout and tag, which is a can I say, a standard in all processes, for whether it be manufacturing or anything else. So as part of asset management, is the, and I was going somewhere with this, just scheduling these, scheduling tasks. So, and sharing that information with the next person who needs, so sending the task. So in early versions of Appenate, you know, that you could have recurring tasks and scheduled tasks and all that sort of stuff, and that's lovely. But what I really wanted to do was have by process. So when a process is invoked, that it would send a task, and you can do that now. Yay! So that's something that so often if you're looking for an approval process to include in your, whatever it is, a request for maintenance or a request for repair or any of that kind of gear, that's captured. So
okay, yeah. Do you want to elaborate on an example as to how you've kind of set that up for one of your clients, or how you can essentially see that being set up?
Yeah, I've done that with one particular client recently, where they're a very small team, so 2 or 3 people working there, and they need to share the information between shifts. So if somebody goes away, or they're called up in the middle of the night, or any of that kind of gear, that they are able to capture and then send that on for somebody else to follow it up.
Yes.
When the guy goes on leave, because it's just the 2 of them who are backing each other up, then that's been quite useful. And because their equipment varies so much, they're also wharf side, and they have silos and inventory that's kept in, onshore. But they have to, but they own all of the equipment that is unloading and also carrying their goodies into a silo. So any of that breaks, let's not even talk about it, right? Yeah, so it's a constant process of monitoring, and they have other systems that monitor that, but then to actually capture that detail and share it between one another, at odd hours of the day or night, then that's something that's quite useful.
Yeah, and processes like this, that would have caused hours and hours of delays, getting that from one person to another, and then you've got accountability and being able to view everything that's happening in real time. So I guess you kind of came into your clients' companies expecting to fulfill a certain outcome, but they've come across and then they've gone all these crazy things which they never would have even thought of. How has that been for them as a client, actually seeing that come to fruition?
Well, I guess, as I say, you guys make me look like a star, because they're like, oh yeah, no, we'd never have thought of doing it that way. We didn't know that was possible, or we didn't think it was possible so simply and so cost effectively. So what Appenate offers is an incredible value for money on the basis that it's giving them the world. You can do as much as little as you want with this resource. So how you want to use it is entirely up to you, but it's not something that they have to think about. So that's I suppose in many respects it's a benefit of having a consultant to navigate that stuff for them. Have you thought about have you thought about doing it this way or that way? At which point they go, employee entitlements and all those other sorts of things. That would be a huge area of
it is
managing those sorts of things. Yeah, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. That and moreover, that's a grinding kind of process to have to manage, and accounting teams have been doing that forever, and doesn't it thrill them either? Well, for some people, that's why they're accountants. They do enjoy that.
They love
it. It doesn't thrill me in the least, but I guess, I'm sure that they're not really rapt about differential equations either. So I guess we, whatever rocks your boat. But it's what I suppose is tying up your team and keeping them from doing the things that really add value. So maintenance and repair is obviously a key element for those organizations with physical assets. Of course, if those physical assets aren't in peak condition and aren't being used effectively, or are being used inefficiently or ineffectively, how that is impacting down the line. So it is important, but if you can hit it with a bit of WD-40 or duct tape, one or the other, and make it keep going for an extra day. It's not really, it's like, yes, but. So having an app that captures those sorts of things doesn't seem like a priority until you know, do the calculation and the impact ultimately. You know, how quickly can you find these errors? Well, if you're doing a regular check, it takes time to do a regular check. Well, actually, no, it doesn't, because you can just go snap, send.
Yeah, with like with the platform, we've definitely seen quite a few updates over the years, which you've been part of. And I think tasking is probably one of the biggest ones in terms of like being able to dispatch a job to someone. They get a notification on their phone. They can see everything that they got to do. In regards to how you've kind of taken that on board with your consultancy, how has Appenate kind of helped you differentiate what you do from other consultants in the industry?
In truth, I don't know too many consultants who do what I do. No one's man enough to do what I do, in truth.
Right.
It's
like the minds of mortal.
Right. So, and I think that there are plenty of, and that might be incredibly arrogant. So I should also say that if there are other people who consult to chemical manufacturing, g'day and lovely to meet you and all of that. But I guess that because we are so far and few between, that it doesn't necessarily make a difference to my consulting particularly. It gives me more tools to my toolbox.
Yes.
And keeping the skill sharp in using Appenate means that I'm able to respond to a client need more quickly or more effectively or in an innovative way. It depends on what the client is actually looking for as to what one would necessarily apply. You know, there are other clients that I'm working with at the moment who haven't even started to set up their manufacturing process, but want to, you know. So I'm already imagining how later on that they might use an app resource. And I suppose but it might come in a different way. It might not be because they've, you know, it might be in recording lab records, you know, that they're not familiar with doing quality control process because that's not the industry they come from. So the laboratory setup might be here, we're going to do a viscosity test, we're going to take a video of it, we're going to time it, and then that's going to be our record of how the product performs or whatever, you know. So of course I haven't written that yet, and these guys haven't really set up yet, but that's irrelevant. You know, I've already you know, kind of thought about how could I make that easier for them so that they're not freaking out about this thing that they know that they've got to do, that if they don't do it, it's going to be the end of their business, you know.
That's also a thing. So like you know, there are so many ways in which people haven't really thought about using a digital solution, but you know, it's just because they haven't actually rolled it out yet, which is
yeah, exactly. And in many respects, you know, we know that the end process may be for as an organization goes, that they want to go to a place or have a certification or have, you know, which means that they need to demonstrate some evidence. And so what form that evidence takes is open slather now. You know, once upon a time it needed to be a physical piece of paper, filed in a particular file, named in this particular way, signed by this particular person, all of that. So that's not how evidence is now. So it can be an audio, it can be a video, it can be a, you know, series of things. So however you're capturing those results, whether it be a test method or something else, then this is a good and useful thing. I think that you have you know, old ways that can be applied or be captured by new technologies. And so
Yeah, and I guess like on that, like I guess it's important to frame the other side of the coin as well in terms of like you know, how people used to use pen and paper. Obviously, people who are older, you know, they tend to be they find it easy using a pen and paper. But you know, aside from like those kind of those initial kind of humps when you're learning the platform, how have you found that in terms of client feedback? Like, have they kind of come back to you and said, you know, is there something about paper which, you know, this used to be, you know, easier to have on my desk, you know, I used to find things easier or something? Like, have you had much of that?
In some respects, I suppose. I guess the one gap is that for those organizations that perhaps I'm not working as closely with anymore, they didn't learn how to make their own apps, or they didn't learn how to make their own adjustments. So that's something that I have to fix now, that I can't be all things to all people. I can't be the only Appenate, you know, consultant. They should be able to do this themselves. And in fact, they can. Of course they can. They just didn't at the time take the time.
They probably could have just asked you, you know, like how to use this thing, and you probably would have helped them anyways, right? So
well, sure. And then that said, I don't want this to be like Chinese whispers where Lisa's teaching people to do it wrongly, you know. So, but the lovely thing about Appenate is that there's no wrong, you know. It either does what you want it to do or it doesn't, you know. So, and that's how you know how to fix it. So
100%.
getting there quickly and working out how that goes is something that you learn for yourself. Yeah, I use it as a like learning a language, and so you either become fluent by use, or you know, after you've learned the syntax, after you've learned the vocab.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way of describing it, actually, because with Appenate, like there's certain like the logic in which we use to like you know, drag and drop different fields into place. You have like a choices field, and you bind different info from that you know, particular row into those particular fields. Like that stuff is not the most intuitive for people who don't have a programming background. But it's much like a language in that, you know, you have a certain structure that you follow, and you know, some languages don't have any structure, you know, like Latin, they just throw kind of things together, and then yeah. So I think it's a great analogy.
Yeah, well, I think that, but there are rules in some respects. I think that I'm not proficient, I suppose, with grabbing data and binding to meta values or those sorts of things, but I'll get there. Or global values and things. I understand the concept. I haven't necessarily always found ways in which that could be applied. So, you know, but
yes,
I think that once you start, and this is, I think I'm going to be, you know, coming close to this place soon, is that once you start inviting the client, the customers of the client, to join the app and start entering information, that's when, yeah, things get busy.
I guess you could be getting a lot of questions coming your way pretty soon.
Okay. Well, I guess in many respects that the as I say, however it is that you want to use it, you can make it as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. But in many respects, perhaps some of the forms that I've created have been quite short, on purpose, so that it is capture that one, you know, those few pieces of information and then go to the next thing. But not necessarily have lots of things in the, you know, and make people, you know, in the app for, you know, 20 minutes or whatever. It's usually just click, 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 go, because that's all the time that people necessarily want to spend with that. But it doesn't mean that they won't try something else. So so what I find is that once they've got that down, they go, okay, I'm getting a bit of confidence now, I'm going to try something else. So, you know, I'm going to do a management change, or I'm going to do a, you know, I'm going to suggest a corrective action, or I don't know, something of that nature.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying,
do a forklift checklist now, and off they go, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, and eventually all these questions are going to end up in my lap. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing it when they do. I guess we're getting to the last couple of questions that we kind of have here today. And with what with what you've done with Appenate, like has that kind of brought up any problems that you weren't kind of initially aware of, like when you're putting in a digital solution? Like not necessarily problems, but areas which could have been improved, but you couldn't really do that conventionally with, say, pen and paper or whatever kind of tools you use.
And I suppose what Appenate has done is given me the confidence to explore other ways that are readily available to everyone, but I just haven't explored them, you know. So that I don't have to have my old thinking. I can use new thinking and modern thinking of, you know, somebody who's 20 years my junior, for example. It's a difference between using a computer and a calculator. You can go along doing the things that you're doing very happily, and that's not a bad thing. But if you want to explore doing other things that you don't have the time to do, then you've got to find ways to speed stuff up. Speed stuff up that doesn't actually add value yet. And so that you can, then absorb some of that other learning. It did demonstrate to me very quickly when I started using Appenate is that the deficiencies in my own, and the stagnation, I suppose, in my own professional education since leaving university. That's not true.
Right.
There are lots of things that you learn on the job. You know, I used to work in a laboratory. I you know, all of those sorts of things. But over the last 20 years, much of the learning has been on the interface with clients and working out things that you would do again this way and things that you would never do again that way, you know. And then also clients that you want to deal with and clients that you don't want to deal with, you know, those that have a learning environment and want to foster that, and those that want to just keep doing the same thing over and over, and all they really want to do is make money as opposed to make a better, you know, world or a better product or a better, you know, environment for or stuff. So but Appenate reminded me that actually, Lisa, you really need to knuckle down and learn some of this other stuff that has overtaken your education and learning, and get up to speed quickly, because you'll be left behind. You know, at high school you learn to type. Okay, it doesn't end there. You know, you gotta do more stuff, and so I've had you know, I don't program at all, as we've laboured that, but in terms of HTML, you know, I know the terms and I get the concepts and whatnot, but it's applying it and integrating it. And now there's an opportunity to apply it and integrate all of those things, and Appenate's done that. It's like, okay. So I'm reading more about this REST technology of business, and it's like, okay, so that would be the stuff that you can upload this to, you know, orders to an EDI and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I understand. I don't know how to apply it yet, but but I then also, I guess, to reflect on some of the work that I did with that particular client in those early days when we were using Appenate in one space. On the other side, I then went hunting around in Google and found these Google sites. So one of the things that they wanted to do was publish, I suppose, some of their safety data and things like that. So it was a combination of things. It was capture some of the safety data and safety learnings, and then at the same time introduce more stuff around Appenate. Okay, so I use Google Sites because for many reasons, but I learned to work with that. But only through Appenate and working with Appenate did I get the confidence to try this other stuff. And, you know, then we send a digital link, and now everybody's, you know, reading on their mobile phone something that, you know, not a PDF, you know, not something that is a facsimile of a piece of paper. No. This is a digital reading of, you know, and then click forward to see the video and further reading on this, you know, click on this image and you get more stuff. So yeah, or click back to Appenate and you'll see how this goes. And that's a really useful kind of resource, not just for my own learning, but then facilitating other people's, the possibilities kind of.
Yeah. But when we kind of look back at what you've done, it's really interesting because like with the barcode kind of scanning and the way you used it as like an asset register, I think you even done stuff like linking like a scale to like a system, like in some of your chemical kind of consulting roles there. So yeah, like we didn't even predict that stuff to happen. We were just like, oh, okay, cool. Lisa's done that, and that's it's really cool seeing how people have used their platform. And I think even more than that, as a consultant, like working with smaller to medium-sized businesses, rolling out this kind of change is so crucial, because in terms of like what we said before, this kind of digitization that's going on, the way that the industry is transforming, and like how you said, you have to learn these skills in order to be able to give yourself more time and give yourself the tools for your business to succeed. That's some really important stuff you're doing. So yeah, no, I think that's kind of a good place to end it. And unless you have any kind of further kind of comments or anything that you want to add about Appenate.
Thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and sort of in a more public forum. I guess the other thing is that I'm pleased that you think I'm doing well with your tool, that I'm using it effectively and appropriately, and helping others to do that as well. I'm very open to doing that. I guess I'm looking forward to getting to grips with each update as they come. Excites my own learning, which I didn't think I'd ever be excited about learning ever again, but here I am, so that's great. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to share. And again, thank you for making me look like an absolute star.
I guess one final question, Lisa, before we cut it off. If you had a crystal ball and you had to look into the future, and there was anything that you'd want to do with your clients that you can't do right now, is there anything that you'd like to add to Appenate?
There are a couple of things that I've if we could link it with drone technology, perhaps helping those learning drones a little more, that might be an opportunity. But perhaps for some respects, the next step may be working out how to integrate instrumentation for whatever it is that's being analyzed, any materials or paints or those sorts of things, collating that data or interpreting that data with Appenate might be the way forward. And as I'm thinking about it, you know what? There's no excuse. I reckon we can probably do that already. So we just haven't tried that yet. So I'll go away and try that, and I'll come back and let you know how that goes. Okay? Yeah.
That's fantastic. And the more kind of creative and driven people like yourself who are on the platform, the more that we're driven to make the platform better. So as you said, really appreciate you coming forth for this interview. You're one of my favorite people to work with on the platform, and it's been absolutely lovely. I'll be having you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Asel. Have a great day.
Awesome, Lisa. You have a great one. Thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, we'll definitely have more of these interviews coming up with more consulting partners coming through as well. Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Catch ya.